The year is 1203, the sands of Khalakhaljid. It is a night saturated with the stench of burning embers and the bitter taste of total catastrophe. The great steppe, which only yesterday seemed conquered, has today rejected its aspiring masters. The enemies have scattered the army of Temujin, the future Genghis Khan. The remnants of his nukers are in full retreat, abandoning their burning yurts and fallen comrades to the flames. At this precise moment, the destiny of an empire does not depend on the genius of a strategist or the sharpness of a saber. The future of an entire continent hangs by a thread, and everything is decided by the endurance of a single horseman. If he slows down for even a heartbeat to catch his breath, if his strength fails him, the 17-year-old youth in his saddle will drown in a crimson tide. An arrow from a Karate archer has severed the neck vein of Ögedei, the Khan's third son, the future architect of Karakoram, and the reformer who will turn a band of nomads into a state machine. But right now, he is just a dying boy, and only one warrior is capable of tearing him from the clutches of death. His name is Borokhul. Standing before us is neither a healer nor a shaman. He presses his lips to the ragged wound on the prince's neck. All night long, while horses pound the earth in a frantic gallop through the darkness, he performs a gruesome, physically agonizing task. He sucks the clotting blood from the heir's throat, preventing it from blocking his airway, and spits it onto the horse's mane. He drinks the death of his master so that his master may live. The Four Heroes cycle opens a new chapter. You have already witnessed the loyalty of Borokhul and the iron will of Mukhali, the strategic genius of Subutai and the fury of Jebe. But Borokhul is forged from a different matter entirely. His story is not about the conquest of lands, but about the right to life. This is the chronicle of a man who became the living shield of a dynasty. Fate played a magnificent joke on him. Found as an infant in the ashes of a Jurchen camp, he was destined for slavery or death. Instead, the boy grew up in the Yurt of Hoelun, the mother of Genghis Khan, becoming a sworn brother to those he was meant to serve. The entire biography of this warrior is woven from paradoxes. An outsider who became closer than flesh and blood. A figure who was granted the right to commit 9 capital crimes, yet committed none. One whose hands were stained up to the elbows, not in gold, but in the pain of others, which he took upon himself. Today, we will dissect the anatomy of a loyalty that tastes of iron and salt. You will see how Borokhul, by saving the heirs, unwittingly laid a mine beneath the foundation of the empire. You will understand why it was specifically his death that drove the cold and calculating Genghis Khan into a fit of uncontrollable madness. True power is built not only on laws, but on men ready to die in silence, simply doing their duty. But even the strongest shields have a breaking point, and one day, the empire will make a fatal mistake. It will send its faithful guardian into the deep northern taiga, into an ambush from which there is no return. Loyalty, measured in liters of spilled blood. Episode 3. Borokhul, the one who purchased the future at the cost of his own life. The year is 1197, Eastern Mongolia. To understand who Borokhul became, one must first see upon whose bones his destiny was built. At that time, Temujin did not yet hold the title of absolute monarch. He was waging a brutal civil war within his own lineage. His primary rivals were not foreigners, but the Jurchens. Before us stands the white bone of the steppe, the direct descendants of the eldest son of Kabul Khan. These were aristocrats who looked down on Temujin as an upstart. people whose pride seemed sharper than their sabers. The conflict began with a public humiliation. At a feast, the Jurchen wrestler Buri Boko chopped open the shoulder of Temujin's brother Belgutai. But the cup of patience overflowed later. When Temujin summoned them for a campaign against the Tatars, the Jurchens did not merely refuse. They attacked his rear camp, killing 10 old men and stripping 50 families of everything they owned. The steppe demanded a blood feud. Temujin's response was total. He did not negotiate. His forces crashed down upon the Jurchens at the Kerulen River, erasing the very name of this tribe from history. Instead of a battle, a whisper, an execution began. The noble chieftains Sachabeki and Taichu were captured and killed. And there, amidst the smoking ruins where the yurts of the steppe's former masters were burning down, a scene played out that defined the future of the dynasty. A Mongol warrior named Jebe, making his way through the looted camp, heard crying. In a rich cradle embroidered with gold, abandoned among the corpses, lay a small boy. Let's look closer. Forget the smoke of the fires. Look into the eyes of this child. In that second, he remained nobody, the son of an enemy, a trophy. By the laws of that time, he could have been killed to end the bloodline of avengers, or sold into slavery for a handful of arrowheads. But fate, or the cold calculation of Temujin, decided otherwise. The child was brought to the headquarters and handed to Hoelun Eke, Temujin's mother. Here lies the deepest psychological paradox of the early Mongol Empire. Hoelun was not playing the role of a kind grandmother collecting orphans. This woman had been tempered by abduction, starvation, and poverty. She understood. Her son, surrounded by traitorous relatives, needed people who had no past. Hoelun was creating an incubator of loyalty. She accepted the boy, gave him the name Borokhul, and raised him in her yurt. But in that yurt, there was room for other foundlings as well. Kuchu from the Merkits, Kokochu from the Besuts, and Shigi Kutuku from the Tatars. Think about the composition of this nursery. The Merkits had kidnapped Hoelun herself. The Tatars had poisoned Temujin's father. The Jurchens had killed his people. Yet their children grew up together, calling Hoelun mother and Temujin older brother. Hoelun performed an act of brilliant social engineering. She tore these children from their ancestral roots and grafted them onto the tree of the Borjigans. She told them, "You are my eyes to see by day and my ears to hear by night." Borokhul grew up with the realization his life was a gift, and for this gift he would have to pay with eternal service. Borokhul matured side by side with Temujin's biological sons, Ögedei and Tolui. They ate from the same pot, learned to shoot from the same bow, but an invisible line lay between them. Ögedei was considered a prince by right of blood. Weaknesses, laziness, and a love for wine were forgiven in him. But Borokhul, however, earned his status through exceptional utility. Nothing was forgiven in him. The psychology of Borokhul was defined by the mindset of the perfect servant who had become a family member. Survivor syndrome reached an absolute here. He understood, should he stumble, show disloyalty or weakness, and he would turn back into the son of a Jurchen, the descendant of enemies. To justify his existence, he had to be faster, stronger, and more loyal than the Khan's own children. Borokhul transformed into Temujin's shadow. He took the post of the first Baurchi, the steward. In our understanding, this rank means cook, but in the steppe of the 12th century, where poison was considered a popular method of regime change, the Bawarchi headed the security service. The man who hands the Khan's cup holds the Khan's life in his hands. Temujin, paranoid about betrayal, entrusted his stomach and his sleep not to his brother Kasar, not to his friend Borokhul, but to the foundling Borokhul. Why? Because Borokhul had no one left but the Khan. If Temujin were killed, Borokhul would lose everything. By defending Temujin, he was protecting the only thread holding him in this world. So, from the ashes of an annihilated tribe, a blood shield was forged. But the kitchen and the tent became too small for him. The empire was growing, and Temujin required not just food tasters, but men ready to step into the fire. Hoelun's yurt offered warmth and safety. Borokhul could have stayed there, becoming the chief manager of the Khan's household, a well-fed and influential noble. But history demanded blood. In 1203, the steppe exploded. Old alliances collapsed. Khan, Temujin's sworn father, sharpened a knife to stab him in the back. Genghis Khan looked around. He did not need servants serving kumis. He needed wolves capable of ripping out the enemy's throat. And he remembered the younger brother who handled a knife so skillfully at dinner. The time had come to trade the ladle for a spear. An exam awaited Borokhul that could not be retaken. The year 1203, a lull between the destruction of the Kerites and the clash with the Naimans. In this brief moment, Temujin executes a revolution that frightens the old aristocracy more than any defeat on the battlefield. He realizes the traditional tribal structure, where every chieftain is free to leave with his detachment at any moment, is merely a foundation of sand. He requires concrete. Temujin founds the Kheshig. Forget any associations with a ceremonial honor guard standing at Talus doors. The guard of the 13th century represents a fusion of a general staff academy, a ministry of internal affairs, and an order of suicide troops. Initially, the corps numbers 70 turkhauds, day guards, and 80 kebtowels, night guards. But the selection criteria here are stricter than in modern special forces. They do not merely enlist strong fighters into the ranks of the guard. The heirs of Noyons and Chiliarchs enter there. This move turned into brilliant blackmail. By taking the sons of the elite into his personal protection detail, Temujin achieved two goals. First, he obtained hostages. No general would raise a rebellion knowing that his successor was sleeping at the Khan's threshold. Second, the ruler personally raised a new generation of administrators, loyal not to their clan, but to the empire. And who became the architect of this system? Who taught this golden youth to stand to the death? The foundling of yesterday, Borokhul. He enters the quartet of supreme commanders whom history will remember as the Dorben Kuluk, the four Steeds, Borchu, Mukhali, Chilaun, and Borokhul. To understand why Genghis Khan entrusted Borokhul with his most valuable assets, one must look at an incident often overlooked by biographers. In it lies the key to the psychology of their relationship. Before us unfolds a story not of clashing armies, but of a struggle in the silence of a single yurt. The time is that same period of turmoil and wars with the Tatars. The main Mongol forces have gone on campaign. The camp of Hoelun seems a safe rear area, but the steppe knows no borders. A Tatar named Karagil Shira infiltrates the yurt of Genghis Khan's mother. He feigns being a beggar, pleading for food. The laws of hospitality are sacred, He is fed and seated near the entrance, but beneath his rags hides an assassin saboteur whose goal is to destroy the future of the dynasty. At this moment, a 5-year-old child runs into the yurt. This is Tolui, the youngest son of Genghis Khan, the future father of the great Khans Mongke and Kublai. Karagil Shira acts with lightning speed. He grabs the boy, clamps him under his armpit, and draws a knife. One motion, and the branch destined to rule China and Iran will be severed forever. But there is one more person in the yurt, Altani, Borokhul's wife. She does not call for the guards, nor does she faint. The woman of a steed reacts instantly. The woman throws herself at the assassin, seizing his braid with one hand and intercepting the hand holding the blade with the other. She holds down the armed man, preventing him from striking, and screams. At her cry, nukers come running and finish off the Tatar. Why is this important for Borokhul's story? In the Mongol consciousness, husband and wife are one bone. Altani's heroism becomes the heroism of the entire household. Genghis Khan sees even a woman from Borokhul's family is ready to die protecting the child of her master. This event cements Borokhul's status. His loved ones are not merely associates, but a caste of saviors. If his wife protected Tolui, then Borokhul himself will safeguard any of the Borjigans. From this moment, he transforms into a mentor and guardian angel for the Khan's sons. Ögedei and Tolui look at him not as a servant, but as an older brother obliged to pull them out of the fire. By 1206, Borokhul receives command of a portion of the Kheshig, but his functions are specific. He is responsible for the inner perimeter. His detachment's duties include court logistics, food distribution, and controlling access to the Khan. In conditions where yesterday's enemies swear oaths of loyalty, Borokhul's job is constantly being in the crosshairs. He has to develop paranoia. The slightest threat must be read in a tray of kumis or in the fold of an envoy's robe. Borokhul demonstrates a unique type of leadership. He does not seek the glory of a conqueror, nor does he build an administrative machine. His ambition is absolute reliability. He turns himself into a perfect instrument. The irony of fate is that the man ready to shield the Khan from a dagger strike in a cramped yurt will soon find himself in a situation for which it is impossible to prepare. He will have to save his master not from an assassin, but from death itself on a battlefield where arrows fall thicker than rain. The Kheshig system seemed invulnerable. The children of the elite guarded the Khan. The Khan elevated the children of the elite. But war is chaos that laughs at schematics. Soon, the Battle of the Khalakhaljid Sands will erupt, and there it will become clear that the golden lineage bleeds ordinary blood, and it flows out all too quickly. Borokhul is about to perform a deed that will move him from the rank of servant to the rank of sacred ancestor. But for this feat, a terrible price will have to be paid. Prepare to see how emperors are created, not on a throne, but slumped across a saddle with a shattered throat. The year 1203, spring. The entire political architecture of the steppe, which Temujin had painstakingly built for years, collapses in a single instant. His sworn father, Ong Khan, ruler of the Karayites, egged on by his own son, Sengum, prepares a trap. Before us unfolds a classic steppe drama, an invitation to a feast in honor of a betrothal, intended to end in a massacre. Temujin is not heading to war. He plans to betroth his children, confident in the unshakable nature of the alliance. But history loves irony. Yesterday's allies, who dreamed of kinship, are today sharpening their knives. In this situation, Borokhul acts not merely as a bodyguard. He transforms into a component of a mechanism obligated to react to catastrophe when it has already happened. The warning about the trap arrives at the last moment from shepherds. Temujin withdraws his horsemen. Instead of an organized retreat, a chaotic flight ensues. However, the Karayites are close behind. The armies collide in a locale known as the Sands of Khalakhaljid. Instead of an orderly battle of formations where commanders move pawns, chaos erupts. A dust storm merges with the screams of thousands of warriors. The Karayites possess overwhelming numerical superiority. Temujin throws his elite units into the fray, the Uruts and Manghuds under the command of Ögedei and Quildar. They hold the front, buying time at the cost of their lives. But in the center of this hurricane, an event occurs that frightens the Khan more than the loss of his army. His third son, the 17-year-old Ögedei, disappears into clouds of dust. Ögedei embodies not just the image of a prince. The son remains his father's favorite. Temujin values him for his reasonableness and gentle character, qualities rare for a Mongol. Later, it is he who will turn his father's conquests into a functioning state. But right now, in the sands of Khalakhaljid, the future of the great Khan is dying. An enemy arrow finds a gap in the armor. The strike hits the neck. The projectile tears a vessel. Instead of a fountain, the blood forms clots, blocking respiration. Amidst the battle, Ögedei loses consciousness and falls. The fight boils around him. Thousands of hooves are ready to turn the heir's body into pulp. Under normal conditions, a horseman wounded in the neck is doomed. Seconds separate him from death by hypoxia. But Borokhul is there. He acts instantly. The warrior jumps from his horse, covering the prince with his own body. In this moment, Borokhul stops being a general and becomes a 13th century resuscitator. He understands. Extracting the arrow will cause immediate hemorrhage. Doing nothing will lead to suffocation. Borokhul chooses the only path. He presses his mouth to the wound. This nightmare marathon lasts all night. The remnants of the army retreat, but Borokhul does not abandon Ögedei. He drags the youth onto a horse. According to the secret history, they ride Sundlat, 2 on 1 horse, with Borokhul sitting behind, wrapping his arms around Ögedei so he doesn't fall off. At full gallop, while the horse batters its hooves against rocks, Borokhul performs a procedure that makes one's skin crawl. He sucks the clots from the prince's throat, clearing the airways and preventing a fatal blockage from forming. Borokhul drains the wound of excess fluid, spitting it onto the horse's mane, onto the ground, and onto his own armor. Appreciate the physiology of this moment, the taste of iron and salt, the smell of death. Borokhul literally takes in the life of his sworn brother to return it to its owner. Blood dries in a crust on his face. Refusing water and sleep, he transforms into a living pump. This is an act of total, animalistic self-sacrifice. Had Borokhul abandoned the wounded man, he could have saved himself on a fresh horse. No one would have dared to judge him. Duty commands the protection of the Khan. However, Hoelun's foster child sees in Ögedei not a master, but a younger brother whose life is more important than his own. At dawn, the exhausted remnants of the army come to a halt. A gloomy Temujin counts his losses. The lists of the missing include Hoelun, Borta, Ögedei, and Borchu. The Khan is sure his comrades have fallen, covering his retreat. Meanwhile, the sentries spot riders. Borokhul rides into the camp. He resembles a demon risen from the underworld. His face, neck, and chest, everything is covered in a crimson crust. But behind his back, pale and weak, Ögedei continues to breathe. This meeting shatters the stereotype of the unfeeling tyrant. Upon seeing his son alive and realizing Borokhul's feat, Genghis Khan gives way to tears. The secret history notes his eyes filled with moisture and his heart clenched. He orders a fire to be lit immediately. Ögedei's wound is cauterized with red-hot metal to finally stop the bleeding. The scar on his neck will remain an eternal testimony to Borokhul's loyalty. That night, the warrior preserved the life not just of a youth, but a future ruler who would expand the empire's borders to Europe. He saved the progenitor of the Yuan dynasty. Looking at his blood-soaked comrade, Genghis Khan utters words that became law. "You have been a true companion to me. Let 9 transgressions be forgiven to Borokhul." Thus, a unique legal immunity is born. From this moment, Borokhul's life acquires a sacred status. Hidden in this triumph is a dramatic irony. By saving the prince, Borokhul preserved the life of a man whose addiction to wine would later nearly destroy him in political intrigues. But then, in 1203, loyalty won a clean victory over death. The battle at the Khalakhaljid Sands served as the bottom from which Temujin pushed off to soar. Borokhul, having washed off the heir's blood, prepared for a reward that would elevate him above human laws. The privilege to sin with impunity is a dangerous gift. It tempts. But Borokhul will be the only one of the great Noyons who turned this right into even more devoted service. Ahead lies the Kurultai of 1206, the moment when yesterday's outcast becomes a Darkhan, an untouchable. The source of the Onan River. The steppe has frozen in anticipation of the old era's finale. Genghis Khan raises the white 9-tailed banner. Decades of intertribal slaughter are left behind. The time of the empire is coming. On this day, Temujin lays the foundation of a state with no analogues in the history of nomads. He abolishes the tribal aristocracy. Origin, whether you are a Khan's son or a slave, no longer matters. Only one question plays a role. Where were you when we drank the muddy waters of Baljuna? Genghis Khan appoints 95 Noyons, commanders of thousands, forming a new ruling class. But even within this elite, a narrow circle stands out. Those who receive not just high office, but a status bordering on the divine. It is Borokhul's turn. The steppe remembers his feat. Stories of how he sucked the blood of Ögedei's wound have already turned into legend. The crowd expects Genghis Khan to shower the hero with gold or grant him cities. However, the Khan makes a gesture that shifts their relationship from the suzerain-vassal system into the plane of sacred kinship. Genghis Khan's stunning speech is preserved in the secret history. "My mother raised you hoping you would become a shield for her sons, and you justified this. You saved my life more than once. You saved my children. You became my companion, echoing my voice." Borokhul's reward is not property. It is Darkhanhood, a title elevating a man above the law. What does this rank mean in the Mongol Empire? Being a Darkhan implies not only exemption from taxes, it is absolute legal immunity. Borokhul receives 3 privileges that frighten any official. First, the right of free entry. He enters the royal tent at any time of day or night without asking the guard's permission. In a state where the Khan's sleep is guarded like the apple of an eye, this signifies the highest degree of trust. Second, personal right to trophies. During campaigns, Borokhul does not have to surrender loot to the general treasury, keeping everything captured for himself. Third, the most formidable, the status of an untouchable. Genghis Khan proclaims, "Let Borokhul commit 9 crimes, and they shall not be held against him." Think about the legal meaning of these words. The great Yasa punished theft of a horse, lying, cowardice, or treason with death. The code operated totally and brutally. But Borokhul is removed from the jurisdiction of the Yasa. He receives an official license to violate any prohibition. 9 times he has the right to betray or kill, and 9 times the Khan will ignore it. Why 9? In Mongol numerology, this number symbolizes celestial completeness and eternity. Genghis Khan broadcasts to the empire, "This man is part of my body. You do not have the right to judge my hand for its actions." Here lies the deepest irony of the hero's fate. The man who received the legal right to become a tyrant does not use it even once. Sources are silent about any atrocities committed by Borokhul. We find no mentions of looting or killing rivals under the cover of immunity. Unlike the shaman Teb Tengri, who, becoming arrogant, beat the Khan's brothers, Borokhul embodies discipline. Before us is a phenomenon of self-restraint. The associate understands Darkhan status is given him not to trample the law, but as a sign that he himself is a living code of honor. He needs no external prohibitions when loyalty is absolute. Borokhul uses his position differently. Having gained the status of an untouchable, he takes on the role of an arbiter. In disputes between arrogant princes of the blood, his word carries more weight than the voice of Jochi or Chagatai. The princes are the Khan's sons by flesh, but Borokhul has become a son by spirit. His clan, the Hushan, thanks to this position, will turn into an aristocracy for centuries to whom everything is permitted. But it is precisely the height of his position that will play a cruel joke with him. By the year 1217, Borokhul has reached the pinnacles of power. He is wealthy, his name commands awe, he stands at the right hand of the master of the world. It seems the warrior is invulnerable. No earthly court has the power to condemn him. But the empire develops enemies who ignore the rules of fair combat. In the north, in the deep taiga, forest tribes are rising up. Genghis Khan needs to crush the rebellion, and he makes a fatal mistake. The Khan sends his best field commander to catch forest ghosts, a man accustomed to looking death in the face, not waiting for a stab in the back behind a tree. Legal immunity only works in the world of men. In the wild forest, completely different laws rule. The year 1217. The empire stretches from the Yellow Sea to the icy peaks of the Pamirs. The steppe has submitted. China is choking in blood. Khwarezm trembles with fear. But a vulnerability has been discovered in this grandiose machine, not on the borders, but in the blind zone, in the deep northern taiga. The rebellion of the Hori Tumats flares up. Before us is not an army in classic formation, but ghosts. The forest tribes ignore the chivalric code of the nomads. Their element is the wind throw, where the Mongol cavalry, Genghis Khan's main power, turns into a clumsy baggage train. Horses break legs in pits, long lances catch on branches, and the enemy strikes from the shadows and instantly vanishes. Genghis Khan reaches a deadlock. His dogs of war, Subutai and Jebe, are born for maneuvers on boundless plains. To throw them into the thicket is to strip them of their main advantage. The Khan requires a commander who relies not on force, but on cunning. At first, the choice falls on Noyan, but under the pretext of illness, he evades this suicidal campaign. Then the ruler summons Borokhul. In this lies a bitter irony. Borokhul, as the flawless bodyguard, the master of close-quarters combat and supply. This warrior is a shield, accustomed to covering his master. But the taiga demands not a shield, but the flexibility of a snake. By sending his fourth steed into the forest wilderness, Genghis Khan unwittingly deprives him of his footing, space. The commander marches out. He moves not as a conqueror, but as a punisher, firmly believing in the triumph of discipline over savagery. However, the Tumats, under the command of the female chieftain Botukui Tarhun, prepare a reception that shatters all canons of military thought of that time. A massive expanse of forest swallows the detachment. The trees close ranks behind them, cutting off routes of retreat. Wishing to speed up the march, Borokhul commits a fatal error. He breaks away from the main forces. Confidence in his own invulnerability, a dangerous side effect of the Darkhan status, plays a cruel trick on him. Borokhul takes only a couple of faithful companions and goes ahead along a narrow path among ancient cedars. Hooves get stuck in the moss. The forest silence is deceptive. The commander does not see the enemy, though hundreds of eyes track every movement of his plumage. In this moment, he ceases to be a general of the empire. He becomes game. The climax arrives instantly and filthily. Without pompous speeches or noble duels, the Tumat scouts do not come out for open battle. They block the path with a barricade of ancient trunks. When the squad hits the dead end, the forest comes alive. Arrows and spears fly from everywhere, from behind trees, from dense bushes, from the canopy. The associate of Genghis Khan, untouched by steel in the great battles against the Jin and Naimans, perishes at the hands of woodland partisans. He is killed basely, in the back, left without a chance to even draw his sword. The death of Borokhul shocks the steppe. The shield of the empire, which seemed unbreakable, was pierced not by a siege engine, but a simple wooden club. The man who possessed the right to 9 crimes and was protected from any execution met his end where the laws of the Yasa are powerless. The taiga does not recognize titles. His body remains on the rotting leaves. The great power that crushed half the world has in one moment lost its pillar. And when the news of this reaches the banks of the Carolyn, it will raise a storm the likes of which the world has never seen. The news of Borokhul's death does not reach Genghis Khan's headquarters immediately. The forest knows how to keep its secrets. But when the messenger, turning pale and stumbling, finally exhales the terrible words, a chaos far removed from political calculation reigns in the golden tent. The loss of a general in war is a statistic. The death of a Noyan is a vacancy. But the death of Borokhul feels like an amputation. Genghis Khan falls into a frenzy that chroniclers describe with a shudder. Before us is not the grief of a ruler, but the rage of a wounded beast. For the first time in decades, the Dorban Kuluk, the Great Four, suffers an irreplaceable loss. Borchu, Mukhali, Chilaun, and Borokhul served as the unshakable pillars of the throne. And now, one pillar has collapsed due to a cowardly strike from the bushes. The sovereign commits an act bordering on madness. The man whose empire stretches from Beijing to the Irtish orders his horse to be saddled. He intends personally to lead a punitive detachment. Just think about it. The emperor, whose life is the axis of the universe, abandons state affairs and strategy to personally chop off heads in the deep taiga for the sake of vengeance for a friend. This moment is devoid of any rationality. Had Genghis Khan perished in this forest skirmish, the history of Eurasia would have taken a sharp turn in 1217. Here, the surviving Steeds take the stage. Borchu and Mukali literally block their master's path. They use their exceptional right. They grab the Khan's horse by the bridle. Their argument from the secret history sounds merciless. You are the trunk, we are the branches. It is not fitting for the trunk to break if a branch has withered. We will take revenge ourselves. The Khan retreats. However, his anger demands blood. He needs not just a commander for victory over the Tumats, he needs an executioner. Dorbei, the fierce of the Dorbet tribe, steps onto the proscenium. His name signifies the ruthless. Genghis Khan gives him a parting word that sounds more like a sentence. Hold the army in an iron fist. Pray to the eternal sky and wipe them from the face of the earth. The Avenger heads to where his brother fell with a single goal: to turn the forests into a massive necropolis. Dorbei the Fierce understands the frontal assault that doomed Borokhul is useless. The Tumats are waiting for the Mongols on the same path, confident that the steppe dwellers will again push forward head-on, blinded by pride and straightforwardness. Dorbei the Fierce undertakes a brilliant maneuver. Before the ambush site, he leaves a decoy detachment, a scarecrow mimicking preparation for an attack. The enemy watches this bait, mesmerized. Meanwhile, Dorbei the Fierce's main forces achieve the impossible. They reject the beaten paths and choose the Red Bull path, animal trails along sheer ridges where only wild yaks pass. Here, the ruthless discipline of the Mongol machine manifests itself. The taiga seems impassable. Warriors freeze before the precipice. Dorbei reacts instantly. He orders every squad leader to take a bundle of rods. Anyone who delays or complains of fatigue receives a blow with a stick across the back. The fighters turn into lumberjacks. They cut a clearing with axes and saws right on the move, climbing vertical slopes. It was a march of absolute hatred. They climbed onto the roof of the world to crash down upon the enemy, literally from the mountain tops. The final comes instantly. The Tumats, confident in their inaccessibility, are celebrating success. They are feasting, drinking wine from cups taken from Borokhul's baggage train. In this instant, the Dorbei the Fierce's warriors fall upon them from above, crashing through the smoke holes of the yurts. It was not a battle, but a bloody harvest. The Tumats had no time even to form up. The Mongols, having survived the hell of the Red Bull path, poured out all their accumulated fury. The men were slaughtered to the root. But the most remarkable thing happens after the massacre. The economy of retribution begins. Genghis Khan does not limit himself to extermination. He turns the survivors into living currency, redeeming the death of his sworn brother. The secret history states 100 Tumat families were given into eternal slavery to Borokhul's clan. Realize the scale of this gesture. This is human weregild. The Khan proclaims, "They took a father from you. I give 100 lives in exchange for one." The killers of the hero will now become eternal servants to his children. They will herd their livestock and tan their hides. And the queen of the Tumats, Botoki Tarhun, who planned that fatal ambush, is given as a wife to the Oirat chieftain, Kuduka Beki, whom she herself had recently held captive. A sophisticated steppe irony. The mistress of the taiga of yesterday transforms into the trophy of her own prisoner. Borokhul's death paradoxically elevated his lineage more powerfully than a long life would have. In Genghis Khan's empire, a cult of those who fell for the Khan flourished, and the commander's children grew up in the halo of a martyr father's sanctity. The Hushin clan, which gave the world this hero, turned into one of the most powerful political forces. The heirs did not limit themselves to preserving wealth. The exclusive right to command the Kheshig was secured for them. A century later, in the Yuan era, his great-great-grandson Ögedei would turn into the richest magnate in China, a king with boundless holdings. His might rested on the sacrifice made in the forest thicket and on that loyalty which once saved the life of young Ögedei. Having begun his path as a foundling in a looted camp, the warrior met his end in the silence of a forest ambush. However, his death triggered a mechanism that made his clan untouchable for centuries. He fell because the empire threw a shield into a battle where a dagger was required. Genghis Khan learned this bitter lesson. The great Kuluks would never again risk their heads in petty border skirmishes. For Borokhul himself, the earthly path is finished. His body decayed in the taiga, but his name forever entered the pantheon of guardian deities of the golden lineage. We have reconstructed the chronicle of 3 of the 4 great associates. Borokhul embodied conscience and the power of the West. Mukhali transformed into the sword and the will of the East. Borokhul remained in history as the shield, sacrificed for the sake of the future. But ahead lies the final hero, the most mysterious of the 4, a personality whose name enemies whispered with horror and allies with reverence. The man whose family tore Genghis Khan from the stocks of captivity and whose heirs will rule Iran even when the Khan's lineage there has been extinguished. In the finale of our cycle, we will reveal the secret of Chilaun. How did the son of a simple farmhand found the mighty Chobanid dynasty? And for what merits did the Shaker of the universe trust him with the most intimate task, the right to pass judgment on his personal enemies?